Russia's President Vladimir Putin has now said that the Wagner paramilitary group, which mounted an aborted uprising over the weekend, was completely financed by the Kremlin. Putin said the Wagner group received the equivalent of $1 billion from state coffers. Without referring to Wagner boss Yevgeny Prigozhin by name, Putin said his catering business made almost the same amount from state contracts to supply food to the Russian army. Putin has pledged an investigation into how that money was spent. Now let's listen to what the Russian president has said.
I want you all to know about this. Support for the entire Wagner group was fully provided by the state. From the defense ministry, from the state budget, we fully funded this group. From May 2022 to May 2023 alone, the state paid Wagner 86,262 million rubles for maintenance and incentive payments.
Philip O'Brien is a professor of strategic studies at the University of St Andrews in Scotland, and I asked him earlier whether Putin is building a case against Prigozhin here.
Boy, he certainly seems to be doing so. That if you go by just the words that are being said, he is doing everything possible to basically say what Wagner did is illegal, that they were benefiting from the state, that they were put down by the defense ministry, that that they weren't really a threat, they would have been stopped by Moscow. So if you look at the words that Putin has been using the last 2 days and the tone that he's been using, it would look like he is making sure that Wagner is going to be put in its place and put in its place very ruthlessly going forward. It's also basically implying that Wagner will be taken in, or most of Wagner will be taken into the Ministry of Defense, which, by the way, still seems to be run by Defense Minister Shoigu, who Prigozhin was trying to get rid of. So I'm not sure anyone around Prigozhin will be relaxing after hearing what Putin has said both this morning and yesterday.
Now, does Prigozhin have any support beyond his mercenaries right now?
It's very hard to say. I mean, one of the most extraordinary things about this mutiny, and I think a mutiny is probably the best word to use about what happened, is that when Prigozhin started this on Saturday, that's when it really sort of took off, most people remained incredibly quiet. So that, yes, some governors came out in support of Putin, and there was a statement by the FSB that this was a crime. But really, most people just kept their heads down. Now, that can be read in one of two ways. On the one hand, there wasn't a lot of immediate demonstrative support for Putin. So it wasn't therefore that Prigozhin was being criticized. However, another reading of what happened is the longer the day went on, because everyone kept quiet, Prigozhin felt he didn't have more backing. That Prigozhin might have been hoping to have elements in the army who were upset with the present leadership rally to Wagner's cause, and that didn't seem to happen either. So it's very hard to say who supported Wagner. It might be that most people just are keeping their heads down and don't want to get involved.
Does that show that Putin really is back in control?
Well, I don't know if he ever lost control. I mean, remember, Wagner didn't get to Moscow and he never lost power. The problem that he has is that there was at least abortive challenge to the idea that he is the all-powerful leader. I mean, no matter how you're trying to describe it now and the words that he's using now, this weekend, a heavily armored column was able to move hundreds of miles over the roads of Russia towards Moscow to at least force him or try and compel him to fire his defense minister and his chief of staff. That force was not destroyed. That force could not actually be militarily put down. It probably it did inflict far more damage than it took. And in the end, it was simply because the commander of that force, Prigozhin, accepted a deal that it stopped. It's very hard to get over that if you're a dictator and have built your rationale on stability and control. he wasn't in control while that was happening. And it's very hard to see whether people will believe he will be in control again.
Phillips O'Brien there from St Andrews University in Scotland. Thank you very much for sharing your expertise with us. And for more on this story, we can now talk to Franak Viacorka. He's a chief political advisor to Belarusian opposition leader Sviatlana Tsikhanouskaya, who's been in exile in Lithuania since 2020. Franak, Alexander Lukashenko has said that Yevgeny Prigozhin has now arrived in Belarus. What's your response to this new development?
Prigozhin's arrival to Belarus is very dangerous for Belarusian society, for Belarusian sovereignty, and for Belarusian independence. Moreover, it will create threats to Poland, Lithuania, and Latvia. It's very likely that Prigozhin will not arrive alone, but he will bring his mercenaries, thousands of people who were participating in torture, in killings of Ukrainians. And right now, together with Lukashenko, they can create the nuclear threat to our neighbors and to entire continent. So it's like they allow the huge gang of criminals to do what they want without any punishment.
Do you think the nuclear threat is real there?
It's real, but I mean nuclear metaphorically, but there is also nuclear not metaphorically, because on one hand, we have nuclear weapons delivered to Belarus during the last few weeks, and Lukashenko or Putin might be willing to use them at some point, but also there is a threat coming from these gangs, because Prigozhin's mercenaries, they are not ordinary soldiers. They are former prisoners, they are killers, murderers. And right now they are receiving the military bases, they are receiving weapons, arms, and they will be able to do whatever they want in Belarus. For Belarusians, it's a shock. We are shocked. Because for Belarusians, these guys are from another planet. We don't want Prigozhin's mercenaries, we don't want Russian troops, and we will be thinking how to get rid of them as soon as possible.
About getting rid of them, your leader, Sviatlana Tsikhanouskaya, has said that she and the Belarusian opposition are preparing a plan of action. Can you tell us more about this plan?
On Saturday, Sviatlana Tsikhanouskaya called on United Transitional Cabinet to elaborate the strategy in case if Putin starts fight Prigozhin. It means that Putin will be weaker, he will be busy, and it can open the window of opportunity for Belarusians. But after Saturday, everything has changed. Now all Prigozhin troops who were going to Moscow now are coming to Belarus. And now it imposes threat to our movement, because it's very likely the repressions will increase, control over society and civil society will increase, and Prigozhin troops will be playing not just the role of some mercenaries, but as the defenders of Lukashenko himself. It makes our task of liberation of Belarus very, very challenging.
Now, Alexander Lukashenko has often been described as Putin's puppet, but he apparently brokered a deal that spared Russia from some bloodshed. Isn't he strengthened now?
Oh gosh, he's not a peacemaker. Let's not make this mistake. He was just a messenger of Putin. Kremlin wanted to propose Prigozhin something, and Lukashenko was nearby as a lapdog, as a puppet, he just implemented, exercised Putin's will. Of course, Lukashenko portrayed himself right now as a peacemaker. I saved the world from nuclear disaster. I saved Russia from the collapse. But he's not. He was just asked to do this by Putin. And if Putin will ask Lukashenko to arrest Prigozhin, Lukashenko will do this. So all the security guarantees by Lukashenko for Prigozhin, they are useless, they are senseless.
Now, do you fear that Belarus could get dragged into Putin's war on Ukraine?
I think Belarusian army will not fight against Ukraine. Belarusian society will not fight against Ukraine. There is a strong consensus in Belarusian society. I just saw the surveys a few weeks ago. 2.5% Belarusians believe that Belarusian army should help Russian army in fighting Ukraine. So I don't believe Belarus will join, but Belarus will be used by Russians. Russia used Belarus as a protectorate, as a launching pad for its attacks on Ukraine. And it's very possible that the new launches of missiles will take place from Belarus territory. It's possible that Russian soldiers will be trained on Belarus territory. It's possible that Russia will take Belarusian arms to attack Ukraine. So Belarus, as the country, will be used by Russia, and we ask international community to help us to stop it.
Franak Viacorka there, thank you very much for joining us here on DW News.